When is it time to leave a relationship?
I believe your heart knows. Your heart knows when you're hanging on to something that is keeping you where you don't want to be anymore. And so it takes quite a bit of surrender and listening and willingness to go through pain,
Mm-hmm.
to take that action when it's going to hurt a lot to do so.
Mm-hmm.
But there's such a deeper knowing that I believe exists within all of us
Mm-hmm.
that goes so far past any this is when it should happen or this is when it should happen.
Mm-hmm.
There's a deeper like understanding of I'm keeping myself in suffering in some way
Mm-hmm.
that at some point your soul will know like I can't do this to myself anymore.
Yeah. Well, I love that first and foremost. Um, and just like we said, the flow thing, right? So that brings me to something that I feel takes time for us to get to. A lot of us get to that space to where we can trust our intuition. I think like a lot of us will feel something, but then we'll second guess it. We don't know, and I do believe that in some cases there might be reason to second guess things that we think we should do where we think it might be intuitive because there might still be some deeper wounds or conditioned thought patterns, yada yada, that are keeping the person constricted from seeing what's really there. So it's like, I think for someone who has been doing some kind of mindfulness for a little while and they've been doing a little bit of the inner work for a little while, that it's like you get to where you can kind of get that feeling more, you can trust it more and you know it more. But I think for a lot of people, they start trying to reason through things analytically,
Mm,
and if they don't know their feelings, you know, it's like, what do you do?
totally. Yeah, you bring up the other good point, which is like it's never black or white.
Mm-hmm.
So there could be moments where you think that you're getting this inkling of, I should just leave. This happened to one of my best friends just last year, where she was in a new relationship, best relationship she'd ever been in. And stuff started happening, triggers started happening on both sides. And she was like, this is just not right for me. And it's that's not always the case either, because oftentimes it can be easier to leave than to face yourself and face your stuff. So um, when we get into those situations, what I think is always so important that we get really, really real with
Mm-hmm.
is, have I done my part?
Mm-hmm.
Have I looked at every single possibility? If I actually care about this relationship working out, have I done everything in my control and invited my partner to do everything in their control?
Mm-hmm.
I think when those resources are exhausted, then there's likely, misalignments and just maybe wrong timing or whatever in
Mm-hmm.
the relationship. But oftentimes we haven't done everything we can
Mm-hmm.
because it's easier to leave than to do the work. So that's another side of the same coin.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so easy, and I think we've, in large part, been conditioned to, if not consciously, unconsciously blame things outside of ourselves, right? So I'm assuming, right, when you say what you're bringing, it's like looking at, has the individual looked at what's under the surface? Are they looking at, or
Right.
is that part of their life, or is it not? Is it not even a thought, and I think, just a real quick side note, like, I think that the number one reason for the divorce rate is because the bulk of people that are in relationships, one or the other or both, have not done any of it, and I also think that, the idea of love is blind, and I don't know where that originally came from, but I think that the more you spend time with anyone, the more you naturally develop feelings for them. And that makes it way more challenging for the inner child to get on board with leaving a relationship. And thus, all of the reasons to stay in the relationship can come up. But to your point, there are times it's like, not to say it's a free pass, you should just leave a relationship if you're not, pulling your weight. That's not what I'm saying, right? I'm just saying I think that so many people just unconsciously don't want to be alone. And in reality, that's the foundation for the most healthy relationship if both individuals are at peace alone.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is where I think everybody will have a different experience. Like my friend I was sharing about, she's typically had more of an avoidant pattern or a 1 foot in, 1 foot out. So she didn't have to fully commit or devote herself. And so when she was going through this, she recognized, like, oh, this is that pattern playing out again. It's easier to leave than to stay and work through all that can come up in connection,
Mm-hmm.
versus somebody like me who's been like, I have no problem diving head first, falling in love, devoting myself fully. But then I have in the past stayed with somebody who wasn't aligned with what I actually wanted.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, my growing edge was, could I, acknowledge this person has so many of the qualities I want, but not all of them.
Mm-hmm.
And I could invite him into meeting me in the ways that I desired to be met, and I did. But if he wasn't willing or not capable, or whatever, the timing wasn't right, I had the choice to decide, do I want to wait for the possibility that someday these needs will be fulfilled through this person? Do I want
Mm-hmm.
to hold out for that? Or am I okay with letting that go now, becoming the person I need by giving myself what I need through the pain that comes up,
Mm-hmm.
and then choosing that, no, I don't have to wait for that. I can welcome somebody into my life now,
Mm-hmm.
um, who already has those qualities. So again, two sides to everything.
Yeah. Well, right. And I know you, like me, see the metaphysical aspect of this reality we're in, right? And something that's always resonated with me, although I think a lot of people resist it, especially if they haven't really made any headway yet with the work, is that when you have a relationship dynamic, or there's, you're in a relationship with someone and something about that person rubs you the wrong way, no matter how loud or whatever, the volume is, that it's really just a reflection of something that is still within you that you haven't worked through yet. How do you look at that?
So this is like my favorite topic, especially because now I've been in my relationship with Justin for 2.5 years, living together. And generally, we have the most easeful relationship. And we've recently talked about why it feels that way. I don't think we um, don't have stuff, but whenever stuff comes up, whenever triggers come up, we work it in the moment.
Mhm.
And we become so aware of those subtle, harsh tones or
Mhm.
contractions, where we bring it to the space together to work on it in the moment together, so
Mhm.
that it down regulates every time, and we come back into connection every time. We don't harbor resentment or any of that,
Mhm.
over time, that allows it all to feel like,
Yeah.
really easeful. But it
Yeah.
doesn't mean that we don't have these little things that come out that,
Mhm.
just irk each other.
Mhm.
And I think there's an equal, like, spiritual side to this, and then just like a human side, where we're different humans living in a home who have different preferences,
Mhm.
a lot of the same preferences, but sometimes different preferences,
Mhm.
and different ways we communicate. And like, we're gonna annoy each other. Like, that's
Yeah.
okay. That's another
Yeah.
thing we don't really make. we don't believe that shouldn't happen. So
Mhm.
we don't actually make it a big deal when it does.
I think not to, I love all of this, not to interject, but I think like a simple question someone can ask is like when you think about when you are in your home, no matter what time of day it is, whether someone's there, whether they're not there, someone just got home, whoever, whatever the dynamic is, if this individual feels at peace with themselves in their home, like no matter what's going on, obviously, like you said, you have these little moments, central nervous system flares up, you work through it, but just generally speaking, you feel like the sanctity of the mind in the home kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think with a relationship like yours, I would venture to believe that you both have that consistently, despite what may come up. But so many don't have that.
Yeah, totally. Totally. We have this underlying level of safety that we've cultivated within ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
I know some of Justin's story, but mostly my story has been through the relationships, through the experiences, the breakups, the home within myself, the safety eye of the storm within myself, I've rooted myself into. No
Mm-hmm.
matter what emotions are flowing,
Mm-hmm.
I this is what's so powerful about the work that I share with people is they shift from allowing their emotions to take over
Mm-hmm.
to sitting deep within themselves, and then emotions can come up like this. We call this spaciousness,
Mm-hmm.
right? The emotions or the thoughts or whatever come up within your spacious awareness,
Mm-hmm.
but it doesn't take over you, it doesn't grip you anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And that allows that deep sense of safety no matter what to be
Mm-hmm.
embodied. And I believe that's what attracted Justin into my life, because he had cultivated a similar level of safety within himself.
Beautiful.
And now in our home, it's like I'm never scared. I'm never not safe to share any part of me, any trigger, because number one, he wouldn't, like, if I shared a thought or an emotion, he wouldn't get freaked out or grossed out that I'm feeling that way, because he doesn't view me as those things.
Mm-hmm.
And then simultaneously, I'm not viewing myself as those things.
Yeah.
They're just energies that are flowing through my field of life, and they're not who I am. So
Right.
that's one of the biggest things that I think many relationships lack is the safety to get triggered and to
Yeah.
share
Yeah.
about them while not identifying with them.
Yeah. It takes doing that work that a lot of us have unconscious resistance to doing. Although it's not as scary as we think it is, going into ourselves and working with our deeper thoughts and emotions and releasing, and going to those emotions that we unconsciously avoid, and making that, realizing, wait, the more I do this, the better everything else gets. So I should probably keep doing this, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but that state that you described, that you found yourself in beautifully, before meeting Justin, the same that he had his own version of, it's because of that work, right? So I'd like to ask you hypothetical questions. So, and I'll give my perspective, right? You take someone who just got out of a relationship, whatever the reason is, it could be divorce or cheat, whatever, yada, yada. I think society nudges us to get back out there, right? Get
Mm-hmm.
back out there and start dating. My perspective is, when you get out of a relationship, stay the fuck out of a relationship, and try to go towards this idea. Do this work where you are uncovering these deeper layers, these deeper aspects of yourself, and releasing and working through all that stuff, all this good shit. And it's really,
Mm-hmm.
really good, right? Because that's going to make that person cultivate that relationship of self love with themselves, which is beautiful. And it's going to take them to that space. And then, because the nature of the energy of the universe, you're going to attract, and now you have something that, hey, now we got something here, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you have, say, you got a new client, right, and discovery call, and right out of the gate, well, he cheated on me and we were together for 4 years and blah blah blah, not to make fun of it, but
Mm-hmm.
how would you guide them if they're like, well, my friends tell me I need to get out there and start dating,
Mm.
What would you say?
Well, first thing that comes to me is just I appreciate the journey my soul chose to go on to be able to share this stuff.
Yeah.
Because one of the biggest patterns I recognized within myself, which was so specific, was every time a relationship would end, I would be in the pain and the groveling and the grief and the hoping and wishing for 2.5 months. Then, exactly 2.5 months later, a new guy, a new shiny object would come into my field, and I would forget everything, not process anything, and then get into the next relationship. And there's nothing wrong with that, but oh, there's a bug. There's nothing wrong with that, but I recognize that I was keeping myself in this codependent nature that was an immediate gratification, but created more and more of the problem I didn't want to experience anymore.
Mhm.
So I would say for somebody going through that, like this is, and anytime somebody comes to me in a breakup, a lot of people, my deep dive group mentorship program is called Rise. And, I coach on relationships. So when people come to the discovery call and they ask, I'm not in a relationship anymore. Can I get anything out of this program? And I'm
Mhm.
like, this is the best time to get in because you really, number one, if you lean into this work, life is going to trigger you so you can practice. So that's not a problem. You don't need the relationship for that. But I've found, I know a lot of people learn and grow through relationships, but
Mhm.
my personal journey was letting go of everything, all the hyperfixations, all of the anxious attachment distractions, and bringing all of my awareness into myself so that I could become the person I had been looking for.
Mhm.
Because I started to realize when I kept getting into these relationships with somebody, all of my well-being would be dependent on them.
Mhm.
And so when we would break up, it was like my entire world was shattered.
Mhm.
So the program that I teach in Rise helps you find everything that you've needed
Mhm.
within yourself and
Mhm.
within your relationship to life and the universe, not just one single person.
Mhm.
So, for somebody who's going through a breakup fresh, I view that as painful as it can be because I know this from my own experience.
Mhm.
It is everything that your soul has been searching for if
Mhm.
you start to use it
Mhm.
to excavate all the wounds that you've been carrying, all of the triggers and the trapped emotions in your body. You get to hold yourself as you feel through that pain so that it can liberate from your system
Mhm.
and no longer attract you to relationships that will end in a breakup, but
Mhm.
attract you more towards a relationship that feels now the way you feel within
Mhm.
yourself, which is
Mhm.
whole.
Yeah, I love that. That's beautiful. A question came to me that might come up. You know, I think if nothing else, at a deeper level, when we're met with this man or woman in this situation, this idea, it's there's a little bit of it's scary, and especially in a man's case, they're not going to admit that.
Mm,
But it's shown well often. It's shown as an unconscious resistance to right. However,
mm,
but from my perspective, and I believe you'd agree. When you get to the space where you're really reaping the fruits of doing this, you realize that oh, it's not that big of a deal actually. Like to get there, and holy shit, it's good. And one other thing for me that I think is worth noting here in this moment, and I may have said it in another episode, but I feared going down this road, and it was consciously. I was like, well, if I do this though, I'm not going to be funny anymore, right? I was like, I'm not going to be funny anymore. I'm just not going to be funny. And I'm like, well, no, that's not true at all. It's not true at all. In
yeah.
fact, I think that in many cases, I'm funnier than I used to be because I'm more free. I'm more able to be myself and express whatever the fuck I want to express, right? And
Yeah.
not have resistance pop up and debilitate me every day. But at the same
Mm,
time, previous versions of myself, if I were to go to a 7 year ago version of myself and say, hey, you need to work through your resistance so you can liberate yourself, I'd be like, what the fuck are you talking about? You know what I mean? Like, that's one thing that I've noticed in my journey with, like putting words on the website and stuff, is I would try to write it from my perspective now. And I realize that doesn't always land, and just if you sign up, you'll liberate yourself. I promise, like, what do you, I don't need that. I want this. I want this. I
Right.
want this. So what do you think about all those words?
Um, I think that's been a big piece of my journey with like bringing my messaging, which I'm a very woo woo. We've talked about this. I'm a
Yeah.
very woo woo person. I'm very spiritual,
Mm-hmm.
but I think kind of tying it into the funny aspect, like we're all human and
Mm-hmm.
we're all on this earth and we're all going through really human, silly things from the greater perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So as I've gotten more clear on like what are those things that even still happen in my relationship, like yesterday Justin made his breakfast a little later than me, and instead of sitting at the table he went outside and ate in the backyard by himself.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed the little part come up that's like, why doesn't he want to sit with me though? And
Yeah.
yeah, and it's just wild to watch these things and to
Mm-hmm.
have such ripe um, information and experience all the time.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not saying uh, that this journey is easy. It's not.
Mm-hmm.
But what's promised if you really dive in is it gets so much easier. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's the hardest in the beginning
Mm-hmm.
to face your pain when you have all these belief systems that I shouldn't feel this way, I shouldn't grieve, I shouldn't feel sad, I shouldn't be upset that he cheated on me, I should get over it. Like all
Mm-hmm.
of that is just a story we've been taught.
Mm-hmm.
And more than the pain, it's that story that is making it so hard.
Mm-hmm.
So as we keep leaning into feeling the pain, hopefully doing it with some type of support system because it makes it way easier and the journey way faster.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the story kind of unravels and releases,
Mm-hmm.
and you'll be able to just feel through the energy, the wave that's moving through your body, and it'll just move through.
Mm-hmm.
So bringing it again back to that spaciousness idea of like it's it's so worth it when you get a taste
Mm-hmm.
of what unhooking from those stories that even this is hard, I'm not going to be funny anymore, like da 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 da, it's all made up. It's all made
Yeah.
up.
Yeah.
So that's the most powerful thing that my clients are experiencing in a matter of only 3 months doing this work,
Mm-hmm.
because once you're pointed into a new realm of possibility, it's like, oh, I don't have to fight this.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it hurts, but I don't have to fight it. And I'm recognizing now that it was
Mm-hmm.
the fight that was actually causing more of the hurt.
Yeah. Yeah. Amen. Um, I'll often say it's all brain training, which some of my
Mm,
friends don't like that, um, because there's like there's more depth. But I look at it as everything starts with thought. Thought correlates to our neurology, our
mhm,
neural networks and all that, right? And that connects to the central nervous system and everything. And so, while if we have a feeling that stays and perpetuates itself and yada yada goes on, it can be the birthing place for a deeper feeling that gets lodged in and forgotten about, etc.
mhm.
But that at the end of the day, the easiest thing to do is to take over our autonomy over our narrative.
Yeah.
And the more that we take over our autonomy over our narrative, the more everything else starts to work itself out. But that being said, deeper somatic work clearly has its benefit, and I've had a lot of benefit from that.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious, so let's say you meet someone, and for some reason you only have 15 minutes with them, and they tell you your story. You're like, oh man, I could really help this person, but they're getting on a plane, and for whatever reason, you're never going to see them again.
Uh-huh.
So, what are three things that you could give them? And we can stay here for a second, or it could be quick. What are three things that you would, if it's one, you got to elaborate on the one. Like by all means, elaborate. But what are the three things you would send them with, and say, hey man, if you just do these three things, man, shit will get really good for you. I promise.
Mm. Well, the first thing before you even asked, I already knew what I would do because I think what I've learned in my own journey, receiving support from incredible teachers and mentors, is it all boils down to we all have forgotten what it feels like to be unconditionally loved.
Mm-hmm.
So if this person is coming to me with whatever challenge, whatever struggle, I would actually pause them
Mm-hmm.
once they share a little bit of their story, and I would just sit with them, and like my belly is starting to turn on, I'm feeling my heart open,
Mm-hmm.
and I would just see them and love them in whatever they're feeling right now.
Mm-hmm. Embrace.
Embrace
Yeah. Yeah.
and not try to change any of it,
Yeah.
because I think that's a big missing piece that
Mm-hmm.
even I'm still learning is the resistance to what is
Mm-hmm.
causing the suffering, just like
Right.
we were talking about. So when people get a dose of what being met
Mm-hmm.
in that deeper level, underneath the mind, underneath the thoughts, the analyzing, the fixing, um, it's first of all uncomfortable because we're not used to being there.
Mm-hmm.
And usually when we're met there, the pain that we've been avoiding starts to be felt and processed. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying it's always fun, but there's a simultaneous feeling the pain and being loved through the pain that allows the liberation.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I would offer them first.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would invite them, which some of my mentors, certain times, you know how sometimes things just land and you're like, oh my God, how could I forget that? I
Mm-hmm.
can do that all the time now. And then, you forget again
Mm-hmm.
months later or days later.
Mm-hmm.
But there's some things that, you know, once you receive a dose or a sip of that unconditional love,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not saying I'm perfect at it, right? I'm still human, but I'm learning.
Mm-hmm.
Now I could guide them to remember what this felt like.
Mm-hmm.
Remember what this felt like, the way I held you when this came up,
Mm-hmm.
how I didn't resist it, how I didn't try to fix it or give
Mm-hmm.
you solutions right away.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next time they're starting to feel that way, remembering that pathway
Mm-hmm.
and offering that same energy to themselves
Yes,
in the moment.
which I love that so much. I think this is akin to just the self hug, right? But
Mm.
it's what you brought in there was tuning your focus to that energy
Mm-hmm.
in accompaniment with the self affection.
Right. Yeah, because, and another piece is what we'll tend to do is think in black and whites.
Mm-hmm.
I do this a lot in myself, um, where I'm like, oh, I'm feeling this contraction. So if I do the practice, then I shouldn't feel the contraction anymore. I should heal it. It should go away and I should be here now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but that's not the case. True presence and all the love and all the okayness and peace and safety that we desire all exist right here, right now,
Mm-hmm.
no matter what we're feeling.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a equal allowing the discomfort to be felt, but to not feel it like I'm the little one feeling this all by myself and nobody's here and I'm alone or whatever. Feeling it with that support,
Mm-hmm.
allowing it to be held with
Mm-hmm.
it, because that's different than, oh, I'm feeling the discomfort. Let me remember what Taiha said and feel we're talking about, and let me just focus on this and do it to push that away,
Mm-hmm.
right? That
Mm-hmm.
actually perpetuates the feeling and doesn't usually work. The feelings want to be just as accepted and loved
Mm-hmm.
as, the negative and the positive, quote, quote.
Mm-hmm.
They're all just energy. And we get to be with it all, but not hyper focus on one or the
Mm-hmm.
other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. It made me think. There's I forget the guy's name, but something he said I really liked, and I think he got it from somewhere. Joy is the mother of all emotions, but she doesn't like to hang out at your house unless all of her children are welcome. I think is
Ooh, I
how it
love
goes,
that.
right? It's like, dude, yeah, that's it, right? But that being said, I think about a historical version of myself. If you met me in a moment like that, if that was me standing there, whatever, um, I think that the embrace and the love I would have felt and would have been like, man, that sure was nice. But then when you were like, now when you just remember to do this, I'd be like, well, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about because I can't do that shit. Now, my thought in this category is kind of back to the brain training thing. So much of this, the patterns that run the show in the background, it's like if the more we with intent go to the pattern, the more it sticks, the more it stays. And I think that also with like our ability to expand, getting in connection with our feelings and our emotions, it's like a nonlinear gym. So the first time you do it, the first time you try to envision in your mind, okay, what was it like when I got that hug and how did that feel? You
Mm.
may not, you may not feel shit. You may not feel shit, but if you rinse and repeat and you keep doing it over time, it develops.
Yeah, yeah, I love that you're saying that. Um, I always get this question of like, man, I know what to do, but when the time comes when I'm in the trigger, it doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
I can't do it. And I'm like, how often are you practicing when you're not in the trigger?
Mm-hmm.
So in my membership and in the Rise program, I encourage my clients to show up every day in some capacity.
Mm-hmm.
I sit here at my meditation station every morning almost for 30 minutes because that's my training ground, right? My
Mm-hmm.
practice for this. So I there's different ways to do it, and it's reminding me of a beautiful share that one of my clients shared with us just yesterday on our call.
Mm-hmm.
She has been in my program for 3 months and was learning the practices, but sometimes, certain parts are just more sticky and it's really hard to figure it out. And she was working on, okay, how can I love the protectors that come up within me, the judger? How do I stop just judging myself for judging myself for judging myself
Mm-hmm.
and being stuck in that loop? And we have many different ways that my clients practice this, not only by themselves, but with each other too. Because what I've found is if somebody was able to sit with me once per week and receive this dose
Mm-hmm.
regularly,
Mm-hmm.
they will have more awareness on how to do that for themselves because
Yeah.
we're filling their system up with a new possibility.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in my program, I encourage my clients to meet up with each other
Mm-hmm.
daily in some
Mm-hmm.
form or another to offer this to each other so they don't have to figure it all out themselves,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then when they receive it in that way, and then they have their self practices with meditations and things that I've created to help them practice on their own, they're just like training the muscle so regularly
Mm-hmm.
that it becomes their new way. And my client finally said like, oh my gosh, I'm like more naturally giving these parts of me love when they come up
Mm-hmm.
because of how much I've been strengthening that skill through our mini sessions and all of that.
Yeah.
So I do want to reiterate like you can do a lot on your own,
Mm-hmm.
but if you want to fast track your journey, nothing has fast tracked my journey more than actually opening myself up to support,
Yeah.
to co regulation, I do this practice with myself,
Mm-hmm.
for myself,
Mm-hmm.
still almost at least every other day, where I get on a call with somebody that
Mm-hmm.
I trust and we
Mm-hmm.
just sit in presence for 5 minutes aside and hold space for each other
Mm-hmm.
in that unconditional love. And that helps things process and me not have to figure it all out all on my own.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
I agree with all of that stuff. To further, emphasize your point, can someone make these kind of shifts on their own? Yes. A lot of it, from my perspective, depends on their environment. If they happen to have a partner or a roommate or a parent that is like really really supportive and really bringing them along, that can be really helpful, and it might be enough. But
Mhm.
you don't have that, and you look at your immediate surrounding. What are they talking about every day? What kind of ideas are they putting in your head? Like, really
Yeah.
look at that shit. That's important. And if you don't have that, having someone outside of yourself, a mentor, coach, whatever it is, to be able to see the unconscious patterns from that unbiased place, from a place of love and empathy. Yeah, I'm right with you. It's been transformational in my journey, and I continue to seek outside counsel for that very reason.
Yeah.
So I love that you said that. Um, I want to go back to, when do you leave?
Mm.
Just that category for a second, because I want to shed my or share my perspective on it. And I think that while this can be illuminating something within the individual, but if you look at it from a clear space and you can say that, hey, the other person is projecting a lot. Now, on one side of the coin, you can say everyone is projecting always, because that's what's happening when we speak. But what is the source of the projection, right? So if they're constantly getting accused of stuff, or they're constantly starting fights and yada yada, if the energy behind that projection, is in these categories, it's like, to me, that's a pretty big red flag that you might not be in the right relationship. You
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. I think who was I sharing this with? Maybe one of my friends. Um, I personally believe we just get to freaking choose
Mm-hmm.
what we want to experience. And I chose, once I went through my last breakup, how this relationship was going to feel for me, how the next relationship was going to feel for me.
Mm-hmm.
And because I had um, done the work to hold myself
Mm-hmm.
in the way that feels the best, right? Is deeply loving, is deeply accepting, as best as I can. If somebody came into my life and wasn't treating me that way,
Mm-hmm.
I understand they're going through their stuff. They've gone, had experiences, they're in pain, but that's just not what I'm choosing for myself.
Mm-hmm.
So if that's happening for you, I would invite you to ask yourself, what do you want? How do you want to feel in your life, in your relationships? And how are your choices creating what you're experiencing? Because even if somebody's doing that
Mm-hmm.
to you, I had this question in my membership the other day, and it was a very powerful topic. Um, we Even when we think it's our partner triggering us, it's not. We're triggering ourselves by
Mm-hmm.
being with somebody who's not treating us well.
Mm-hmm.
That's our choice.
Mm-hmm.
So I I just I guess because I've been in this space, in this relationship for a long time, it's actually hard for me to relate
Mm-hmm.
to staying in any relationship. Like all my friendships are the same way. I do not entertain people who project onto me.
Yeah, yeah, right,
You
right.
know?
Yeah, no,
It's
and I think
not.
I think you also get to a space where, as much as a historical version of myself would be like, that's not how the world works. Like, you get to a space where your vibration it just doesn't bring it in. It just doesn't come around.
And it's not
Somehow. you
it's
know?
not the case that it doesn't happen.
Hmm.
I project onto my friends, they project onto me, but what I mean is we don't stay in it. We don't believe the truth of that.
Hmm.
We have a willingness and a deep dedication within us to clear ourselves of what is untrue,
Right.
you
You
know?
recognize, wait a minute, hey, there's something here,
Right, right.
and yeah, yeah.
And that's where the safety comes. Again, back to the old point of like triggers are okay
Hmm.
and it's safe to be triggered and it's safe to actually work through it together.
Hmm.
But the difference is all the people that I have in my community, in my close community, I trust them to do their part. And
Hmm.
I trust myself to do my part. And we're not perfect.
Yeah.
That's okay. I just know we're all aligned in those values. And I think that's the
Hmm.
main thing that we need to have healthy relationships is aligned values and an aligned willingness and devotion to how we want to feel
Hmm.
um, together.
Yeah. Amen. So to clarify, or just to make sure I'm on the same page. So if someone is in a relationship where the other individual's projecting, not healthy projection, right? Um, you're basically saying take a pause, reflect. What do you really want? Does this relationship, align up with that? Because clearly there's something in you that's being shown here. Um, and then yeah, I guess take that recognition and then make an executive decision, because you have to make an executive decision to either stay or go.
Yeah.
And but in most cases you would likely get to the space where you're like, okay, I should probably leave this one.
Yeah, and we can't make it so black and white because every person, again, these are just my experiences,
Hmm.
and they're not going to necessarily apply to different people who have a different path. So,
Hmm.
again, like my friend I shared about in the beginning, I don't know if I finished the story, but they finally were facing that it wasn't the relationship, it was their stuff
Hmm.
making it about the relationship. And
Hmm.
once they worked through their stuff, they came back together.
Yeah.
So that's totally possible too. And I
Right.
think a huge thing that most of us struggle with in relationships is not boxing each other in
Hmm.
to one way of being. So
Hmm.
like let's say that you are absolutely in love with somebody and they are still working through their trauma, their triggers, their projections, and
Hmm.
you're in a little bit of discomfort because of the way they're showing up.
Hmm.
We also have the opportunity to hold each other in the vision of what's possible
Hmm.
and seeing each other as our soul, not as our human trauma,
Hmm.
right? And we can't make somebody grow. We also don't want to be attached to somebody growing in order for us to finally feel fulfilled.
Hmm.
But the way we view each other will really dictate how we can show up.
Hmm.
So, um, for example, in my relationship with Justin, there was a earlier part in our relationship where I wasn't sure if he was going to be enough for me, if he was
Hmm.
doing the right work, if he was this, if he was that. And so I had boxed him into being that way, like
Hmm.
boxing him into not being enough. And that was cutting me off from seeing the truth of how even if he wasn't doing this work the same exact way that I was,
Hmm.
that doesn't mean that he's not going to be enough
Hmm.
for me. He can't meet my needs.
Hmm.
So there was this like unraveling that needed to happen within me to see him fully.
Hmm.
And that was actually my work. I think there's a echo that just started happening.
Uh-oh.
Can you
Sorry.
hear me? Oh, it's gone now. That was
Okay.
weird. um, I had to work through my own projection onto him so I could see him more fully. And the craziest part that happened was once I let go of needing him to
Hmm.
do this certain work that's exactly my version and da 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 da.
Yeah.
He found his own way to that exact work
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
because I let go of the
Yeah.
attachment to it, you know?
No, I think you brought me to a really good space. So the first answer would be, well, it may not be really about them projecting. First, look at what's going on underneath your surface and see if perhaps you're the one that's, yada yada. You know, if then you feel like, okay, no, I feel like that's all pretty good and well, and say you love this person, to whatever degree, I would typically say to that person, like, all right, well, like you said earlier, we can't wake people up, but if you love someone and you want what's best for them, I think it's okay to shoot your shot. I think it's okay to be like, hey, can we sit down and talk for a second? I've really been thinking yada 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 and all, I love you, but I really want to talk about this, what's behind this, and then see what you're met with. And if you're met with resistance in that moment, then it's like, okay, hey, you shot your shot. Maybe you should think about leaving this relationship.
Yeah, yeah, I like the nuances we're getting into because there's a lot of different angles to look
Yeah,
at
yeah,
this with.
yeah, yeah.
But something that I think is beautiful is always to ask like if I imagine myself to get into a new relationship with somebody who's doing something that doesn't feel good for me, it's not that they don't know. This was what was so cool about watching my friends go through their thing. There's a level of choice and standing for what you need
Mm-hmm,
and the values you want to hold for the relationship.
mm-hmm,
So like if somebody's going through this thing and I can see that they need to do their part to work through it
mm-hmm,
because that's what I need
mm-hmm,
in the relationship. Like I can stand for that. I can ask for it.
mm-hmm,
I think the challenge comes when that's what somebody wants
mm-hmm,
their partner to do, but they're not willing to let it go if
mm-hmm,
they don't do it,
mm-hmm.
you
Yeah.
know? So there's like it's not even words, it's like a rooting into your center
Mm-hmm,
and your choice, your decision for yourself and what you get to experience.
mm-hmm,
Like I'm inviting you to step forward with me.
mm-hmm,
And you can choose to do that or not.
mm-hmm,
If you don't choose to do that, it's not a I'm ahead of you and you need to catch up.
mm-hmm,
It's a we're doing this together.
mm-hmm.
But if you're not willing to do that, that's not aligned for me anymore.
Yeah.
So there's that level of willingness. Like my friends, they both called each other forward once
Mm-hmm,
they saw what was happening in
mm-hmm,
a new way
mm-hmm,
because their highest priority was the relationship,
mm-hmm.
was each other, was their devotion.
Yeah.
And sometimes that will be the case, and other times it won't.
Yeah.
Like my last relationship, he was an amazing person. We had an amazing relationship, and there were key misalignments
Yeah.
that just weren't going to happen at that point. And we knew that we weren't life partners once we really got down to it.
Yeah.
So there
Yeah.
had to be a willingness to let that go as well.
Yeah. Amen. Well, I think this is bringing us home. So to come back to something I started to go into, it's going to be a little bit shorter now because of time. But let's just take that. Let's just say that we have an individual now who is like, okay, all right, maybe I'll give that a shot. And okay, you know what? If they're not willing to do it, man or woman, right, whatever, and they're not willing to do it, then yeah, I'm gonna take a stand, and I'm gonna work on this so that the next time that I get in a relationship, it'll be an improvement in the quality of the relationship because I've done that work, and maybe I'll find myself doing that and being like, wait, I'll just keep doing this and see how good it can get, and get
Mhm.
really far along with it. So instead of saying take all the time in the world, right? Since we do have time here, let's talk about from your perspective 3 things for this person. Okay, let's say I'm out of the relationship now, and what I mean by that is like 3 habits,
Mhm.
whether it's related to the triggers are your teachers aspect or whatever, but 3 habits that man, if you do these three things and you stick with them, this is going to be good for you.
That's so good. Man, I wish we could talk longer because there's so many directions we can go. We'll do it
Yeah,
again though sometime.
definitely, definitely.
Um, okay, I'm bringing myself back to the time where I was going through this,
Mm-hmm.
which I will just say the cloudiness of grief sucks sometimes. No
Mm-hmm.
matter how much you know it's the right decision, you're not going to know it's the right decision all the time, and
Mm-hmm.
that's normal.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and what I think was the most transformative for me was using every trigger, every contraction in my body when I'd see my ex uh, just walking down the street talking to a girl, like friend that's a girl,
Mm-hmm.
or left town to a music festival. These things that brought up such intense fear of abandonment or trigger or pain in my body, sitting with those as often as I could,
Mm-hmm.
really like cocooning myself, not in a negative way, but like in my own space to
Mm-hmm.
so I could fill up on myself,
Mm-hmm.
and not just feeling it, because people get mixed up with this a lot. Feeling your pain is not enough to heal it.
Mm-hmm.
You gotta make sure you are receiving love and support while you're feeling the pain.
Mm-hmm.
So you can do that with yourself, which is again holding yourself, rocking yourself as you're crying your eyes out, like really feeling, this is what I did a lot, feeling my future self, the
Mm-hmm.
version of me that I am right now with the relationship I have right now,
Mm-hmm.
her holding me and rubbing my back as I cried
Mm-hmm.
and receiving the words from her that I needed to hear to remind me, why the heck am I going through this?
Mm-hmm.
So that was a like self-fulfilling experience. And then what else I leaned on was all the people in my life, the communities, the programs I'm a part of to support me on this journey,
Mm-hmm.
doing those little co-regulation practices as often as I could so that I could receive
Mm-hmm.
love and medicine from many different people,
Mm-hmm.
fill myself up on that so I stop being so attached to this one person to get that.
Mm-hmm.
So those two things.
Mm-hmm.
And then just a continual remembrance of, who do I want to be in 1 year?
Mm-hmm.
What kind of life do I want to live? What kind of relationship do I want to be having? And how do I need to show up today to make that a reality?
Mm-hmm.
Because so often we're wanting the immediate gratification and not realizing that we're pushing what we actually want
Mm-hmm.
so much further into the future,
Yeah.
that if we could just do what's a little bit hard now, we're,
Mm-hmm.
like you've shared, drawing,
Mm-hmm.
magnetizing the reality that we want
Yeah.
to us so much faster.
Yeah. And if you look at it as like, well, that's beautiful. If you look at it as like, it is all muscling. It's like training muscles, muscling. It's training muscles, you know? I want to add one in there
Yeah.
just in case someone's listening. Like, I'm going to take this away. I want to add one in there that I'm sure that you would agree with. Um, be free from screens your first hour and last hour, or at least 30
Ooh,
minutes, you
yeah,
know?
that's
And,
great.
and like you were saying earlier, do something mindful, go out to nature, take a walk, you know?
Yeah, there was a many times I went to Yosemite, which is one of my, like, I call it my grandparent because I've grown up going there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I went there for 4 days by myself, turned my phone off, and like fell through all of this shit.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it was so hard and the most powerful thing ever because,
Yeah.
again, this loving presence, it can come from anywhere. It's
Yeah.
all over. We've just hyper fixated to believe it can only come from this person.
Yeah.
So that hour by yourself
Mm-hmm.
really helps you bring all of your loving awareness
Mm-hmm.
back into your body. And that's very, very important to do too.
Yeah. If you do, like, if you set that as a foundation, right? it's like the best time to prime your mind to do
Mhm.
this stuff, you
Yeah.
know, and like you make more headway because of that.
Yeah.
Well, Taiha, thank you so much for coming on and hanging out with me again. And I'm so glad we got to do this. I feel like we dove into some really good stuff, but you're right. Maybe we can do it again and expound further on all this stuff. So if someone wants to learn more about your program, I'll put the link below.
Cool.
Is there a particular link that we should put?
You can just put my Instagram, and then I have a bunch of links in my bio for them to learn more about
Okay.
what I offer. Yeah.
Okay. And just curious, is it strictly women that you serve, or do you also serve men?
In the Rise program, it's all women right now.
Hmm.
I'm hoping one day Justin can take care of the men. But it feels really good for it to be all women in that space. But the
Okay.
grounded membership, which is a super affordable way to get tons of support, Justin and I both create videos in there, and it's very, very special space. That is open for men and women.
And that link will also be
Yep,
at the
in
same
my
place.
Instagram bio. Yep,
Okay, awesome, sweet. Do you have 2 seconds after we wrap this up?
yeah, for sure.
Okay. Well, for everybody else that's been hanging out, thank you so much for spending time with us. I hope you found value in this. And if you want to learn more about Taiha, check out the link.
Thanks, guys.